I don't need him this time. Oh, fudge. Tatum's face. No, I laughed because I saw Tatum's face. Old trophy. Can they hear that? Oh my god.
Yo, yo, yo. Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws. And this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
We're here live. We just watched the play-in game, Lakers versus Minnesota. I know it was a long game. Sorry for the,
As well as
yeah,
Bucks.
the sorry for the late stream, but we did watch both playing games, so we're just here to talk to you guys about it. Give our thoughts, voices, opinions on everything that we witnessed tonight. And before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the OBT Podcast. To kick it off, I guess we should start with the Miami Heat game. It did not go as we thought it was going to go. We had Miami winning, and yeah, that basically did not happen at all. It was not close at all. Miami came out struggling in the first half. It looked really bad. So, take it away. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, for a good stretch of the season, I was kind of always wondering, like, is Miami just, kind of just waiting around, just kind of going through it, or are they just kind of just maybe not that good? And I
Right.
think after watching this, I think maybe Miami's probably just not that great of a team. I mean, we both picked Miami to win this game, but I think we did acknowledge that, Atlanta has a chance, right? I mean, I think tonight was pretty much the definition of it's one game, literally
Yeah.
anything can happen. Um, I mean, in this game, I would say um, I was kind of surprised that Atlanta was as disappointing as they've been this season because I feel like the Hawks have a decent amount of talent.
Yes.
And they made upgrades at the trade deadline too, right? They got Sadiq Bey. Well, I guess he's like the only guy they got, but still, he's an effective player, and he helped them out tonight, right? In the game
Yeah.
where DeAndre Hunter had foul trouble, and didn't really play all that well. But it's just when you look at Miami, I mean, the struggles. It seems like they're too small. They really struggled shooting tonight. I mean, even at the rim, they were missing a lot of like just gimme shots. I mean, you look at Jimmy Butler, right? He had 21 points, 9
Mm-hmm.
assists, 2 steals. It seems okay, but 6 of 19 from the field. Like that's and a lot of those shots were just either shots, like I said, that were at the rim that he just missed,
Right.
or shots where I will give credit to Atlanta's defense, where they did a good job of kind of like making Miami sort of think twice at times, right? Clint Capella, even though he didn't really score, I thought he had a great game defensively and on the boards. I mean, Atlanta killed them on the glass. I think that's kind of the difference in this game, really. I mean, you look at the second chance points, and I mean, it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Atlanta had what, like 20 second chance points, something like that, and
Something around that.
Miami was like single digits, right? It was like maybe 5 or 6. That's the main difference. Trae Young played fine.
Yep.
Well, really well, I think. He didn't shoot well from three, right? He hasn't shot well from three all year, but got to the rim pretty much whenever he wanted. Even helped on the boards. He had 8 rebounds, right? And
Yes,
that
he did.
that speaks to, just how bad Miami's rebounding was. It didn't matter whether or not they went big. They had Cody Zeller out there at times,
Right.
and he didn't really do much of anything. Um, Love was out there for like 2 minutes,
I
literally
didn't
did nothing.
understand that. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
weird.
yeah. I mean, they were struggling. They were trying to find options. I think it's just not that great a roster, right? Kyle Lowry was insane. I mean, he had 33 points. He was still a plus minus of -12. Plus minus doesn't always tell the whole story. They were better when he was out there, but he was also out there at times when Atlanta would go on a run. Every time Miami got it semi close, Atlanta would just kind of pull away. It felt
Yeah.
like, I think you got to give it to Atlanta. I think they're the better team.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
and again, like we thought the reason why we picked Miami to win was because we believed that Jimmy Butler was going to have a great game, and he really didn't.
No, it was really
Um,
poor.
Yeah, and Bam was also really awful. I mean, they at times it was kind of AD-esque where like it seemed like at times they couldn't really figure out ways to get him involved. But then even when he got involved, I mean,
He was just missing.
he wasn't effective at all. Gabe Vincent was bad. Hero was fine. I mean, he was okay. He took a lot of shots, but I mean, also wasn't that great defensively.
Right.
Struess was awful. And that's kind of like, that's really the story of the game was a lot of Atlanta's guys showed up and kind of showed like this is why they should have been better than what they are right now. I mean, was a 500 team,
Yeah.
but now you just kind of wonder with Miami, are they possibly going to just get knocked out? I mean, because obviously our East playing bracket is kind of dashed, right? Because we thought that the Heat were going to win, but they might lose to whoever wins between Chicago or Toronto. I mean, because they played really poorly against Atlanta, and I don't really think Atlanta's really good.
Yeah.
Um, but
I was gonna say because I
yeah,
was gonna ask you, do you think we were wrong about Atlanta, or was this just a fluke? You know?
I mean, in the play-in, just one game, anything can happen. History-wise, right? Miami has played very well against Atlanta.
Right.
They've typically done a very good job of guarding Trae Young. They did a great job last year, but that also was last year, right? Miami was the
Yes.
number one seed in the Eastern Conference. Um, and they weren't this year, right? They were
Right.
playing teams. They might actually miss it, if they lose again.
Yes.
Which again is possible. I mean,
Very
Miami's
possible.
offense has been really bad for most of the year. It was really bad tonight.
Yep.
Um, Defensively, but it's just they're so small. I mean, you looked at some of the lineups. I mean, they would have lineups with both Lowry and Vincent, and also Hero,
Yeah.
and then maybe like Caleb Martin, who I like Caleb Martin, but again, with three small guards, you can't have him at the four, right? And then bam, right? It didn't work. So
Especially like considering that the Hawks had a Congo in, um,
yeah,
John Collins and Capella in at the same
yeah.
time a few
I mean,
times.
Atlanta just punished Miami with their size, and
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of the key factor in this game. I mean, like even when you look at the 3-point shooting, I mean Atlanta didn't really shoot well from three,
Right.
um, but neither did Miami. It's funny. I think Miami actually shot better,
Yes.
right? But again, the second chance opportunities, right? That was the main difference, right? Because even from the free throw line, Atlanta was bad,
Yeah.
right? So poor free throw shooting, poor 3-point shooting, but I mean, around the basket, Miami couldn't really do anything.
Yeah. And I think
So,
that was the story of the game. Like they got shut down at like every point, and they kind of mounted a little bit of a comeback, Miami
yeah,
that is, but it didn't last. And
yeah.
Atlanta really stopped the bleeding pretty quickly, if you ask me.
And just to kind of like also throw some interesting stuff out there, there had been a report, I think it was earlier today or yesterday, right? We're from the Ringer with Kevin O'Connor, where he basically said that Atlanta has kind of had sort of like the green light to do whatever they want this offseason, including maybe trading Trae Young.
I heard about that. Yeah.
So, yeah, I do kind of wonder, like, this type of performance from Trae Young, is that kind of like sort of a message? You also saw, I think, at one point he was yelling with a coach, an assistant coach out there. So I do kind of wonder what Atlanta's future is, right? Because Chris Haynes reported earlier in the season that he could be the next guy to ask out if Atlanta doesn't really do a whole lot, right?
Right.
Obviously they're the seventh seed, but I don't think anybody's giving them a chance to beat Boston. So
Yeah.
like if they had lost this playing game and got eliminated, is that going to be that much different than just losing to Boston? I mean, I guess you're happy you
Yeah.
made the playoffs, but I don't think Atlanta should be satisfied regardless of what happens because they shouldn't be a 500 team. They should be
No,
better.
they should be way better. At least like fifth seed. I think fifth seed is a good benchmark for them because they've touted that they have all the talent in the league and all this
Yeah.
stuff, and they hype themselves up. They really did it to themselves. So it's like we can only place these kind of expectations on you because you place them for us. And I don't know. It's just a weird situation, but to be honest, I'm kind of happy they won, but I'm also a little bit mad that we're not going to be able to see that Miami versus Boston matchup.
But I will say, if Miami played like this against Atlanta, that might be a really quick series against Boston. I just
Exactly.
don't know because I understand I understand that a lot of Celtics fans and just like people in general feel like Miami can max them, but I just don't think they've been good this year.
Yeah,
Like
it's different
like I
than previous years for sure.
Yeah, but I picked them to beat Atlanta, but only really because of Jimmy Butler, not really because of anything else
Right.
that I've seen from the team. Like they've been a lot worse than last year. I mean, the record 44-38, not awful, but like they really had to fight to get to those 44 wins. It wasn't like, it was smooth sailing to
Yeah.
that point. They had been bad for most of the year.
Yeah. I mean, like, and I don't know, like, does this like, make you think that we were completely wrong about both of these teams, or, like you said, is this just,
I mean,
one and done?
like we said, in a one-off game, because we stressed this in our last podcast, in a
Yeah,
one-off game, anything can happen,
right,
for sure. But at the end of the day, I just feel like I still think Atlanta's not really that great, but I also don't think Miami's that great either.
right,
Just in general, I wasn't really that super hyped about the Eastern Conference play-ins because the teams I don't think are that great, and I don't think either of these teams are gonna put up much of a fight against the 1 or 8 seeds. Like is Atlanta gonna make this Boston series that much of a series? Maybe.
right.
But probably not. I
Yeah,
wouldn't think. Again, they have the talent, but they haven't really shown it for most of the year. But
yeah,
they definitely outplayed Miami. They definitely showed, I think, that they were the better team. We were definitely wrong about that for sure.
yeah,
But again, I didn't think Miami was that great.
yeah.
So
So like takeaways wise, what were your highs and lows? I think for me the low was definitely Jimmy. I expected him to go off, and kind of put the team on his back and say, I'm gonna drop 30 points and we're gonna get out of this playing. But that didn't happen. But for my highs, they're really for Atlanta. I think Trae Young played decent, and I don't know. They just, to be honest, I might have to put it to coaching because it seemed like
yeah,
they didn't really struggle with anything, and it seemed like they had a game plan for Miami, and Miami seemed like they played right into the Hawks' hands, because
I
they
mean,
they couldn't get anything going. But
yeah, I thought, yeah, the game plan was really sound, but I also just think the roster for Atlanta, at this point, I think we kind of have to agree is it's probably just better. When you look at
yes,
Atlanta, they have more size. Again, they're not that great of a 3-point shooting team, but they don't need to be against Miami because Miami doesn't shoot that well either, right?
yeah,
Um, I mean, we saw every single time Miami would kind of make a semi run, they'd miss maybe 1 or 2 shots, and then Atlanta, even if they got a stop against Atlanta, they just get another offensive rebound, and just put it right back up, and then it's an easy 2 or 3 points.
yeah,
So for me, the highs were like you said, mostly for Atlanta. Trae Young played very well. Um, Dejounte Murray was pretty solid, right? Sadiq Bey, right? Bogdanovich, Jalen Johnson, Okongwu, right? They had, that's in the play-in. Usually your stars are kind of you would think for one game your stars are going to be the reason versus whether or not you win, but you still need solid performances, I think, from your role players.
you're right,
Like, because I think over the course of a 7-game series, obviously, you need the role players, but you also need them against, one game because, one guy's, I guess for one game, one guy could do it by himself, but just in general, you need other guys.
yeah,
So Atlanta had more guys to turn to. And just, again, bigger, stronger, faster. I guess my question with Miami is where do you go from here? Because
right.
again, even if
Very good
you
point.
win, you know, the 8-9 matchup, right? I don't see them getting past Milwaukee. So it's to go from a Jimmy Butler shot, away from being in the finals to probably either going out in the first round or maybe not even getting out of the play-in. I wonder what Miami is going to do in the offseason because
Yeah,
this roster to me is not good enough to really do a whole lot. Kyle Lowry was really good tonight, but
yeah.
he
He had
hadn't
what,
really been good.
33?
Yeah, but he hadn't really been good most of the season. If you got this version of Kyle Lowry, they wouldn't be where they are right now.
For
Not,
sure.
to pin it all on him, but
Right, right, right.
I just wonder, I mean, maybe you might have to break some of this up because where are they really going?
Yeah,
Jimmy Butler obviously is still really good, but Bam's really good, but outside of Hero and a couple other guys, I don't really know where you can really turn.
yeah,
At this point, I just feel like there's other teams now that have surpassed them, right? Like Cleveland at this point is better than Miami. Um, so and there may be some other teams coming up. So I don't know.
yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
we got a chat. Okay.
Oh, who said something?
Chris,
Oh, it's
Christopher.
Moverse. What's good, Moverse? Um, hey, Moverse, did you watch any of the playing stuff, bro? What did you think of the games? Like any of them, either one, doesn't matter. But while you're answering that question, yeah. So like in regards to what you were saying, I think you got to move on from Kyle Lowry and Oladipo. I think they're just dead space at this point, and that's not a knock on them or anything like that. But I think it's time that they part ways. And maybe there's some way that you can get something in return for that. But I don't know. Something's got to give and go because I think Tyler Hero is the future of that organization. You build around him and Bam, Jimmy too, obviously, but Jimmy's getting up there. in age, so you don't know how many more seasons he's gonna have left. But do you agree with that? Kyle Lowry and Oladipo have to go.
Yeah, Mover said they're washed. So I think Oladipo, I thought he's a free agent, so I mean he may not even be back anyways. Lowry, yeah, I definitely think so. I think he's got what, 1 or 2 years left. I can't
Yeah.
remember if I thought they gave him a 3-year deal, right? So he's
Hmm.
probably got one more year.
Right.
Um, so, but I mean, who are you moving him for? I mean, I can't imagine like a
Exactly.
team is going to give you a lot for him. I mean, you almost wonder if they're just kind of just stuck with him. I mean, that was kind of the gamble signing him, at this point in his career. Like, I mean, he had a really good game tonight, but overall, he hadn't really been great this season. He hadn't been able to stay healthy
Yeah.
the last couple of years, and that's kind of the gamble when you sign an old point guard.
Yeah. You said
Playoff
playoff
Jimmy.
Jimmy. What about him though?
Yeah.
He didn't really, give us
Yeah, he
that
won. Yeah, he didn't show us.
alter ego, He didn't really step into that too much tonight.
Yeah.
Um
I mean,
More like
Atlanta played
playoff
good.
Lowry, to be honest,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, Atlanta played good defense. I mean, on these guys, because again, like every time these guys went up, there were some shots that were gimmies, and then there were other
Yeah.
shots where it's like they kind of had to think about it. It wasn't like just an easy layup.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, Atlanta's bigs and size just made all the difference. I mean,
Yeah.
especially again when you look at Cody Zeller, which I didn't really like that signing.
Right.
Kevin Love, I thought was an okay signing, but he didn't really do anything tonight, and really couldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
and then, Oladipo only played 9 minutes, right? I mean, he's had flashes at different points, but overall, he's been not really that good. Strus was awful. I mean, we went over it.
Yeah.
Pretty much almost everybody for Miami, aside from like a couple of guys, was like basically the worst versions of themselves.
And like to be
And that's
honest,
kind of
there's yeah. And to be honest, there's not much really to say, outside of the Heat stunk it up tonight and Atlanta was better than them. Simple as
this
that.
was definitely, I think, the weaker of the two games.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
for sure. And, do you want to segue into the next game? I feel like that's the game that
yeah,
everyone wants to really
yeah,
talk about.
let's do it at this point. So
Yeah.
obviously, Lakers, Minnesota, right? This was a pretty hyped play-in game, right? Considering how the Lakers have been over the second half of the season since the trade deadline,
Yeah.
right? And obviously with Minnesota, with the controversy with Gobert, with his suspension and McDaniel's being out, right? This you knew this was going to be an interesting game. Now, we said going into this game, right, that it was probably going to be a close game, right?
Mhm.
Like, I didn't care that guys were out for Minnesota. I did not care. In a
Right.
one-game scenario, anything can happen.
Exactly.
And this was about as close as you could get. I mean, it was incredibly back and forth. Minnesota outplayed the Lakers for most of the game. And then the fourth quarter and OT came in, and like Minnesota was awful. I think they had 16 points combined in the fourth quarter and overtime. I
Yeah.
mean, I think like at a certain point, like they were just on fumes. I mean,
And it didn't help
most of
that
their
Towns was out for a little bit. Sorry to cut you off,
exactly.
but
He was in
Towns was in
foul
foul
trouble.
trouble. Yeah.
He was in foul trouble. In the minutes he played, he was really good. Right, one of his best games. Conley was awesome.
Yeah.
But Edwards really stunk it up. He was really bad. He was 3
Yeah.
for 17, 0 of 9 from 3. I mean,
Yeah, it
that's
was
not
rough.
yeah, that's not going to get it done. I mean, that was really the difference, right? Cuz I mean, off the bench, you got Nikhil Alexander-Walker who gave them some good minutes. Jalen Noel gave him a couple of good minutes. But really it was all about the starter, right? And then when you look at the Lakers, I mean, kind of the half opposite, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
you only really had a couple of starters for LA really play that well, right? LeBron, you know, had a plus minus of -14, but I
Right.
mean, I thought he had a pretty solid game aside from just some awful turnovers, right? 30 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 blocks, a steal. AD was really good, especially defensively, right? Didn't have like a super high scoring game, 24 points, but had 15 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals. I mean, you'll take that. But I mean, then you look at then you look at the rest of the starters. Reeves, not very good tonight. 12 points, 4 of 13. Uh, I mean, his defense was fine, right? I think he spent a decent amount of time at
Yeah.
different points on Edwards, but D'Lo was awful. 1 for 9, 0 of 4 from 3. Like I
Yep.
said, I've never really been. I mean, his playmaking was fine. He had 8 assists, right? Only one turnover, but he couldn't hit a shot at
Yeah,
all.
that kind of hurt them, especially
I mean,
early.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I've never really been a huge fan of his. I mean, so I kind of knew that a game like this was probably coming, but just to see it in real time was just wild. But
Yeah.
in general, right? I mean, then you also had Vanderbilt who had 0 points. I mean, obviously he's not in there to score, but he at times was okay defensively, right? But I
Still,
mean,
0 is that's kinda
yeah.
rough. You should
But
at
then,
least have 2
Wenyen
'cause
Gabriel
yeah,
played a random 2 minutes.
yeah,
Didn't really do anything. Troy Brown Jr. 17 minutes. Didn't really do a whole lot except get a couple rebounds. Schroeder was awesome off the bench.
yeah,
Um, we were concerned at one point because he looked like he stepped on D'Lo's foot and turned
yeah.
his ankle. So we thought that
Looked like he tweaked it.
he subbed out, and we were like, is he gonna be able to play at all? But I mean, they needed every bit of what he was doing because they
Yeah,
don't win this game without him. He was incredible down the stretch. Right, hit that big shot, to give them the lead with a second left, and of course they foul on the three. But neither here nor there. Um, so that was the main difference. But also, like, I was still kind of surprised at how the game was because, like I said, I thought it was going to be a close game. Wasn't surprised that the Lakers started off flat, but like you kind of thought that like at a certain point they'd pick it up, but like they had to really, really struggle to get out of there. I mean, ultimately their stars took them home, and then you had a couple of guys show up, but it was just kind of just daunting to just see just how awful some of these guys played. I mean,
yeah.
what were your thoughts?
I mean, it was a really rough game. I mean, to give the viewers some context, we watched the game together and it was rough. Like we were literally just sitting here like, is this even the NBA? Like there were some stretches where it was like very confusing, like what the game plan was from both sides of from both teams. And, my thoughts on this, like for the Lakers, it wasn't pretty. It was not a pretty win by any means. It was a win, and this is what we picked. We picked that the Lakers were gonna, beat the Timberwolves. But, you know, in my opinion, I think the Wolves really outplayed themselves. I don't really think it was a situation where the Lakers outplayed the Wolves. And, that's the unfortunate reality because there were a lot of mistakes on the floor. And, that's really unacceptable. And I think both of these teams need to really clean it up if they even want a shot at advancing beyond, the seeds that they're even going to be playing for. Um, and I think AD, he was a bright spot. He had a double double, 24 and 15. LeBron obviously brought bright spot, 30 and 10. Um, but yeah, D'Lo, he needs to step it up. Basically, I feel like everybody else besides, LeBron, AD, and Schroeder need to, really lock in and get in that playoff mentality. They just didn't look, very. They didn't look like they were all there. They looked a little bit absent-minded sometimes, making terrible mistakes. Like I said, bunch of turnovers, unnecessary too, fouls, really bad fouls. I don't know. Yeah, like maybe you want to talk about the fouls.
Yeah, I mean, you had the situation right at the end of the game where Shooter hits the big shot right with a second to go,
Hmm.
wide open. Kind of weird that they drew up a play for Dennis Schroeder to hit the game-winning three, but in fairness, he shot well from three this game. Um, and then with 1 second left, 80 comes out to contest Mike Conley. Initially, does a solid job. It wasn't gonna go in. Then he, steps near his foot, fouls him, and of course Conley makes all three free throws because he's a very good free throw shooter. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of Mike Conley, but just the fact that that happened was just insane. And again, we saw that earlier, right in the season, right? We saw that against Dallas, right, where he had
Yes.
that three-play stretch where he fouls Maxi Kleba, right, then misses
Mm.
one or two
Yep.
free throws, and then leaves him open for the game winner. So just a lot of this weird yeah, like because that's the other thing, like LeBron and AD, like even though they played well, they still made like a lot of just like really poor decisions at
Yes.
times. Like LeBron like had a couple of times where he just completely threw the ball away, and it was
Yeah.
just like
Out of character.
couple of times it was like, "What are you doing?" I mean, it was just I mean, again, they still won them the game, right? They don't win this game without those two guys, but just, to see even the veteran guys make mistakes is just kind of wild. But at the same time, I kind of felt like going into this game, considering like for the last 5 games that they played against, like were pretty unserious games, right? They were playing against teams sitting their starters. I feel like that's kind of not really like, the greatest position to be in because I feel like that can kind of in your mind kind of like get you used to playing bad basketball because
Right.
like the last several games they pretty much like sleptwalked through most of the games where
Yes.
like they were like we don't really need to try, we don't really need to give effort, we can win this game, and like
Right.
it kind of felt like that at different points this game, but I mean, you still got to give credit to Minnesota, right? They shot the heck out of the ball.
Yes.
Um, I mean, the path for them to win is pretty much how it went for most of the game for them, right? They needed to shoot well. They needed to have LA have a really poor shooting night, which they did for most of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, they still shot horrible, right? Yeah, 41 from the field, 32 from three. And then they also needed, to not send the Lakers to the line a ton, right? The free throw discrepancy wasn't too big, right? It was I think Minnesota had 15, Lakers had 24, and some of those free throws were like at the end of the game, when they just
Right.
foul intentionally. So this difference really wasn't that significant. So you pretty much had all of the factors that you needed if you wanted Minnesota to win the game. But then again, you know, I think they just ran out of gas. I mean,
For sure.
all the starters played a lot of minutes. Every starter played over 40 minutes, and they played really well. But at a certain point, when you're shorthanded, stuff like that is going to probably catch up to you. But I mean, they played a heck of a game, and this is also one of the reasons why we probably picked why we thought Minnesota was probably going to beat whoever comes out of that 9-10 matchup
Hmm.
because Gobert will be back, McDaniels won't be back, but Kyle Anderson played relatively well, right?
Yes.
Um, he's a really impactful player for them, so I think they can still beat whomever is the 9-10 seed. Um, but at the same time, when Gobert's out there, it makes it harder for I think for Towns and Edwards to get it done. But I mean, Edwards was awful
Especially
tonight without
Edwards.
Gobert, so I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I mean, if Gobert comes back, I mean, they should probably beat whomever comes out of that. I
Yeah.
mean, New Orleans could win.
Very
Oklahoma City,
possible.
maybe they could win. Yeah, because again, Minnesota almost won tonight, right?
One game. All it
Exactly.
takes.
So, but just to kind of put a bow on it, yeah, this game was definitely the
Oh, for
superior
sure.
game, even though again it was a very ugly game.
I think it was closer, a little bit more exciting. But like you said, the mistakes kind of made it entertaining for me because I'm neutral in this. Like I don't really. It's not that I don't care. It's just I don't have a personal stake in it. Besides, me choosing that the Timberwolves are the dark horse. But you were as a Lakers fan, I'm sure that was like excruciating. Because watching it with you, it's kind of funny to hear your reactions. You're calling out the coaches, not in a bad way, obviously, but being like, well, that's not the smartest thing. And it cost them. They made a lot of mistakes due to that. Did you want to touch on poor coaching at all, or?
I mean, that was kind of one of the reasons why, like, I don't have. I mean, I believe that they could go far, but if they were going to get eliminated early, these type of things would be the reasons why, right? Is
Right,
you have a rookie head coach who, as we saw, is prone to making some decisions that I think are not great decisions, right? I
right,
think I didn't like the fact that he took out some of the starters relatively early and had them sit for really long stretches.
right.
I didn't really like that at all. I thought it was really strange how he would put D'Lo back in, like, because he was Schroeder closed the game. He played 33 minutes off the bench, which is crazy, but
Yeah, that
he
is
had a
wild.
really good game. But like he would like in the last couple of possessions he would bring D'Lo back in. Like there was a play where they were inbounding it, they inbounded it to D'Lo. He had sat for most of the fourth quarter or overtime, whatever it was, and then he doesn't catch the ball clean, and then it's a turnover. It's
Right.
like that's why I wouldn't put a guy back in that hadn't really played a whole lot. I mean, he played 24 minutes in a must-win game.
Yeah,
So I mean, you might as well just sit him at that point.
yeah.
Um, I
Weird
mean,
lineups too.
yeah, yeah, weird lineups. Right, Wenyen Gabriel played 2 minutes, and then didn't come back in again. I don't understand what the point of that was.
Right.
He played 10 guys in the first half,
Yeah,
which
that was
again, that's
crazy.
that's a lot. I mean, because that means multiple guys are getting subbed out, and I just don't think you can do that in a game like this. And like I said, lack of continuity, coaching staff mistakes. That's going to be their Achilles heel, regardless of who they play. Because LeBron and AD were pretty good tonight for the most part, and they
Yeah.
still almost lost, to a shorthanded team because of stuff like that. So I mean, you just never know. But again, in fairness, though, playing is very different from a playoff series because again, one game, anything can happen, right? We saw 2 seasons ago, right? We had the Lakers and the Warriors in the play-in, right? And the Warriors for most of the game outplayed the Lakers, right? And then
Yeah.
LeBron hit the big shot, right? And kind of clinches the game for them. And then I think most people at the time thought that Golden State was going to beat Memphis in that play-in game, and then they didn't. They went into OT and they lost,
Right.
right? Um, so you just never know, right? In these one-game environments, I mean, that's kind of the reason why the play-in is such a beautiful idea, honestly, for the most part.
Yeah. Special.
you know, there's some things that, kind of I don't necessarily like about it, but at the same time, like overall, I love it way more. The positives outweigh the negatives for me.
Yeah. Same.
But
And I learned something today. I didn't actually know this. I might be showing my semi-casual card here, but I thought it was very funny that they were consistently pointing out that all of these stats are in their own league. So, they're not tied to the regular season and they're not tied to the postseason. Like play-in stats are play-in stats. They're in their own realm. And I think
they
that's
don't
kind of
count.
interesting.
Yeah, they don't count towards playoff numbers. But again, it felt like a playoff game. Because again,
Yeah,
it's a serious game where that has a lot of ramifications, right? And
exactly.
so, it's
This
it's such
determines
a
the
great
lower
idea.
seeds.
Yeah, you said what?
This determines the lower seeds.
Exactly, yeah, because now the Lakers, and we'll get into it after we're done talking about the games, but now the Lakers are the seventh spot, Atlanta's the seventh spot in the East.
Yeah,
So, now we have more playoff series that we'll be able to, kind of preview and talk about.
right.
And then we'll have another one, obviously tomorrow once the next well, not tomorrow because it won't be finalized,
Yeah,
but after the over the next few days we'll have those finalized and we'll know who the eighth seeds are.
yeah. So, um, you know, in regards to Minnesota,
Mhm.
do you think they can, beat whoever comes out of this next
Pick them.
matchup?
Yeah, I picked them to
Yeah,
beat. I think New Orleans will beat Oklahoma City. Although again, it wouldn't shock me if Oklahoma City, won because I think you kind of mentioned it in our last podcast that they
yeah,
feel kind of like a college
yeah.
team,
They
right?
have
Where
that
they're
like energy.
yeah, exactly. They're really scrappy. They play hard. It's a really weird team, but again, in a one game environment, you never know, right?
They
And
they could be
especially
prone to win. I don't
yeah,
know.
and
It's weird.
if yeah, and again, Shea Alexander's probably gonna be the best player on the floor.
Yeah,
Unless Brandon Ingram has an incredible game, which he's certainly capable of,
right.
right? So obviously that gives you the edge, but I think Minnesota will probably beat whomever is the 9-10
Yeah,
winner because I feel like Minnesota is probably just better.
right.
I mean, because Minnesota, like, because with New Orleans, there's no Zion, right? Minnesota's got their two best players, Edwards and Towns, right? Whomever you think is better. Um, and then they still have like a semi decent supporting cast, right? Mike Conley, Torian Prince, Anderson, Kyle Anderson, right? Gobert will probably be back. Obviously losing Nas, Reed, and McDaniels hurts, but
Yes.
I still think they have enough to beat whomever comes out of the 9-10 spot.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't necessarily feel that way about Miami.
Yeah. I get that 100%. And now like after seeing this game, in regards to Minnesota, Edwards, he's got to pull it together. On the last podcast episode, I said, he's probably gonna take over and say this is my team now. Well, that clearly did not happen. He shot 3 for 17. That's really bad.
Yeah.
0 for 9, and we were saying we felt bad for him. But it didn't look like he had a groove. He didn't really look like he was in it. He couldn't get a shot to fall, and then he had the scary fall. I don't think where he fell or jumped over. Who was it? I don't think it was AD. Was it? Was it Vanderbilt?
Uh, I can't even. I think it
No, it
was
was
Van.
Hachimura.
Oh,
Hachimura.
Hachimura, Rui
Yeah, he
Hachimura.
jumped over Hachimura and then fell right on his shoulder, and then I think they were icing it up. And he's trying to, get some
Yeah,
heat on it, and it looked stiff. I don't know, but he couldn't get anything to go. And if Gobert comes back, I think his woes potentially could continue. But
yeah,
that's a conversation to be had, a little bit later. But yeah, I was not liking what I was seeing from Ant Edwards, but I know he can bounce back. But it's just a matter of when and how. Conley, really good. Towns, really good for me. Uh, Anderson, really good. Prince, really good. But and see, even some of the guys on the bench, like Alexander Walker, really good. Came out of nowhere. I'd completely forgotten he was on the roster. He had a emphatic dunk, a couple of scoop lays. It was kind of cool. But yeah, like I just don't know how far either of these teams are really going to get. And it's funny because I think these are both of our dark horses, right?
yeah.
So like, you know, has this is this is this swaying, what you think about the Lakers at all, or are you still kind of just iffy on them, but you still
I'm
think they're the
still
dark
iffy
horse?
just because, again, like I still question whether or not they can stay healthy
Right.
for 6 weeks. Right? We saw AD kind of grabbing at his shoulder. I mean, maybe it's nothing, but
Yeah, I
that's
did
the
see that.
concern. I still am concerned about the lack of continuity. Since they've only really played together a handful of games with the
Right.
rookie head coach. Um, but again, this was one game. right? And obviously Memphis is a different team. So obviously we can get into it in a minute, but you just over the course of a 7 game series, right? When you have more time to plan and make adjustments over the course of a 7 game series, and it's just completely different matchup. You just never know, right?
Yeah,
So I mean, like I said, they weren't really my pick to come out of the West anyways, but at the very least, I mean, I think they have a chance against Memphis, right? Like, I
for
mean,
sure.
I don't think it should be like whoever wins. I don't think it's going to be like a sweep or a 5 game series of whoever wins.
Right. Well, speaking of the a couple of the matchups that we'll have, did you want to get into those right now?
Yeah, so obviously, like we mentioned before, with the 7th seed in the East, right? You got the Hawks going against the Celtics. Like I said, I don't think that's going to be much of a series. I mean, Atlanta, I think, is you know just an okay team, right?
Right.
I mean, again, they have talent. They should be better, right? I think they are okay enough to steal at least a game.
For
Um,
sure. I think one or two, to be honest.
yeah, I don't think Atlanta will win the series. And I don't think Boston's going to sweat at all.
No.
But at the very least, I think they're capable of winning a game or two. It just depends because Atlanta's not that great of a 3-point shooting team
No.
either. I
And
mean,
you would think they are due to the people on their roster, but it's
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, and Boston's way better than Miami.
Right.
So I mean, and Atlanta's not, they had a solid defensive game tonight, but I don't think they're a great defensive team. That's why they're a 500 team.
Yes.
Right, and Boston's going to be a lot tougher to guard than Miami because it's not, only a couple of guys you got to worry about, right? It's Tatum, Brown, say Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White, Horford. I mean, Boston has way more guys that they can throw, at Atlanta, and I think they can probably do a better job of stopping Trey Young than Miami could.
Yeah. And with Boston, I don't know, man. Like I said they could get bounced first round. Well, I think that take is kind of just blown to pieces. Um because I think versus Atlanta, it's going to be a really uphill climb, an uphill battle for Atlanta because the Celtics are going to put the clamps on them. Miami didn't really defend that well today, and that clearly showed in the score. But yeah, I think the Celtics are probably going to shut them down. Now that I know who their matchup is going to be, and the thing with Atlanta is who's going to be guarding Tatum. Who's going to be able to shut him down. Do you think Tatum's prone to go off?
Um, Against Atlanta, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, Atlanta does have solid wings, right? DeAndre Hunter,
Yes.
um, I guess Sadiq Bey, but like, I mean, I don't feel like those guys are gonna stop Jason Tatum. I mean, I feel like Jason Tatum's generally played relatively well
Right.
against Atlanta, but tonight with that Heat playing game, that's also kind of why I don't think you can really take the regular season matchups into account. I mean, because there's so much context that goes into each of those games, right? Because sometimes you have games where guys don't all play, right? Or, just maybe it was a slightly different roster.
Right.
You just never know. So, I mean, but in a 7 game series, I mean, I think Boston has more guys that I would trust than Atlanta, right? I trust against Atlanta, I would trust Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. I would trust most of the Celtics guys to play relatively well against Atlanta.
For sure.
So I think that's probably going to be a relatively quick series, right? It
Yeah.
may be 5, maybe it might be 6 if Boston just has like a horrible game, um, or 2. But
Yeah.
I don't see that going any further than 6, and I would probably lean more towards like a quicker 5 game series. I'm always
Honestly,
going
it
to
could
give
be a sweep.
Yeah, I mean, I always like try to give like the lowers, like the underdog at least like 1 game because you
Right.
never know, right? Like sometimes like a team could just win 1 game,
Especially at
or
home.
yeah, exactly, especially at home. You just never know.
Right.
Um, and again, with a team like Atlanta that has multiple guys, they could all just have a really good game, and Boston could have a horrible game, right? We've seen it happen before. Even with championship teams, sometimes they'll just have a horrible game, right? And the other team can capitalize off that. But I don't think Atlanta has any chance of beating Boston, assuming both teams are healthy.
Right.
Yeah,
So now I guess moving into the West, we would have Lakers
Lakers.
versus Memphis, and I feel like
Yeah,
that's kind of going to be the more touted matchup. I think a lot of people are probably going to tune into that one because
yeah,
even Dylan Brooks today said I wouldn't mind going up against LeBron in the first round. I mean that's
yeah.
crazy. He's showing his kahunas, but like is there really anything there? Because I mean he hasn't really proven that he's a really good player. I feel like he's more of a troll. But anyways, not to give Dylan Brooks any more attention than he already gets. Yeah, what do you think of that matchup? Like, as a Lakers fan, are you scared? Because, if I was a Lakers fan, I would be kind of shivering in my timbers because, I think with the with the Memphis Grizzlies, I'm not completely sold on them, but they're a really good team. And, with Ja, I don't know. Like, I know Vanderbilt's a good defender, and you got 80 in there, but I just don't know who's gonna really be able to stop him without fouling.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, I think you always usually got to give in the, in these matchups with the higher seed, you usually have to give the higher seed more, of the edge because they're
Yes.
usually the 2 seed for a reason. But it's just weird because with this Lakers team, even though they're the 7th seed, since the trade deadline, they've been way better than their record would indicate. I think they're like 18-9 since the trade
Yes.
deadline, right?
Very
So over
true.
the course of an 82 game season, that's a much better record than what they ended up being. What was it? I think it was what 44-38, or not 44-38. Whatever. Yeah,
43-39, I think. Well,
43-39.
now, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So I mean, I feel like they're better than that.
Right.
But at the same time, I just don't know because I mean, I think if Steven Adams is unlikely to play, I mean, it didn't seem like they completely ruled him out, but they said he's unlikely to play in the postseason. But
Yeah.
he's been practicing shooting around, so that's kind of weird. But assuming Adams isn't available and Brandon Clark isn't available, I would think it would be much harder for Memphis to be able to contain Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially with Jaren Jackson Jr. He's a great defender, but he can't defend without fouling,
yeah,
unfortunately.
that's the other issue. And again, the Lakers generally get to the line a lot, right? So that's obviously going to be a problem. Obviously, Ja is awesome. So I mean, I think that's going to be the other aspect is how do the Lakers guards play because they didn't,
Right.
other than Schroeder, the guards weren't really that great tonight.
Right.
But Ja, you would think in theory should be, have a pretty good playoff series. Obviously, you have to guard him a lot differently, right, than Mike Conley because Ja's
Yes.
not really that great of an outside shooter.
He's
Obviously, he's
improved,
capable.
but it's
Yeah, he's
not it's
capable
not
of
great.
knocking down. Exactly. He's not like a dangerous three
No.
point shooter. Um, and Memphis as a team is not like a great 3 point shooting team. They
No.
traded Luke Kennard at the trade deadline, and he's been really good for them as a shooter.
Yeah.
Um, Jaren, right? But Desmond Bain, obviously, Dylan Brooks is hit or miss, literally. Um,
That's a good one. That's a good one.
yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I think this should be a series. Like, obviously, if you really believe in this Lakers team tonight, probably doesn't necessarily make you look great. But
Right.
again, like at the same time, like this is one game. We'll have to see how it goes in a 7 game series, right? Where,
Yeah.
a lot of other, where you can get away with losing a game or two. Um, it's just obviously the difference is you're not going to be at home. You're going to be on the road to start. But I think they could definitely steal one of the first 2 games. And if you steal one of the first 2 games, then I mean, you're already, only a few games away from making it happen. So
Yeah.
I think they can definitely upset Memphis. I don't think they should necessarily be favored. But I mean, in theory, you got 2 of the 3 best players on the floor.
Right.
And I think this is still, even though they didn't necessarily play well tonight, I still think this is a solid supporting cast, right? I mean,
Yes.
I don't think the role guys for the Lakers are bad. I mean, I think a lot of them had a bad night, but I don't think D'Angelo Russell's a bad basketball player.
Yeah.
Um, but I still also don't know what is he going to look like in, a postseason in the playoffs because, he's only been into the playoffs a couple times and including last year, and he was pretty awful last year.
The
Um,
only good one that he had, I think, was the Brooklyn one.
yeah, and I mean, and he was awful tonight. So I mean,
Yeah.
if that's an indication of how he's going to play, that's pretty problematic. I
And
mean,
he's not a defender either, so he might. Do you think he's gonna start? Because
yeah,
you think he's gonna start?
yeah. I
Okay.
mean, yeah. I mean, he started tonight. I mean, they
Yeah.
just benched him the
But
rest of the
hey,
way.
Schroeder, he did look really good.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
like
I
I don't
mean,
even know like which one of them is really a better defender. Like,
um, D'Lo has size,
right?
but
And
Schroeder, I think,
length.
yeah, yeah. But Schroeder's the more scrappy, like point of attack,
That's what I
get in
was
your face,
thinking.
pick you up, full court defender. It's just the issue with Schroeder is he's so small,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he's certainly capable of making really good defensive plays, and he always competes defensively, or
Yeah.
normally he competes. Sometimes he'll coast, but um, just in general, I don't think D'Lo's been bad defensively as a Laker. He's been fine, I think, but I think that is a weakness for the Lakers is they don't really have any elite defenders at the guard spot, right?
Exactly.
They have, you know, decent defenders, but nobody that I would call elite. Like even
Right.
Schroeder, I think is a solid defender, point of attack. I don't think he's an elite defensive guard,
Oh yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, you have Vanderbilt, who's really good defensively. AD is obviously a monster defensively, but I don't know. But at the same time, they've been one of the best defensive teams since the trade deadline. But Memphis has also been a terrific defensive team. So it's kind of at this point, it's gonna kind of probably come down to games like this, where it's like, if it gets really close at the end of the game, which team are you more likely to trust? I feel like I would probably be more likely to trust the team that has LeBron and AD over the guys in Memphis.
Yeah.
But you never know, right? Memphis is the 2 seed. They've been overall better than the Lakers this year. So I mean, I feel like they should be favored, but I don't know. I mean, I think the Lakers can definitely beat Memphis, but
Yeah, it's
you know,
possible.
but these type of upsets don't normally happen. But it
No.
is kind of funny because I feel like most people are picking the lower seeds in some of these matchups, right? I mean, because I don't have to talk about it a ton, right? But say like but Golden State's heavily favored against the Kings, right? The Kings are the
Yes.
3 seed. And when you look at who people are picking to come out of the West, nobody's picking any of the top 3 seeds. Most people are picking Phoenix, Golden State,
Right.
maybe one of the LA teams. That's pretty much it, like
Yeah.
maybe Denver, right? But like if you look at the tier, most people are like either Phoenix, Golden State, maybe LA, right? So that's the 4, 5, 6, 7 seeds basically. So I mean, I don't know how much faith people really have in the top 3 seeds, but
Yeah.
that kind of goes back to how open the Western Conference is. I mean,
It's wide open. It's
yeah,
actually scary.
there's no real elite teams,
No.
in the West. There's a lot of good teams, but there's no team that I would say is like a great team. But
There's not a
you know,
standout favorite. Like
yeah,
it's so
it's just
weird.
yeah, it's just weird because considering what Phoenix and the Lakers did at the deadline, you wonder if they're probably better than their actual record.
I think that's the case. I think you're hitting it right on the nose. I think you're spot on. Um, to keep it on the Lakers, my concern is how are they going to game plan for Ja? That's the only thing that I think is really, putting me on the edge of my seat if I was a Lakers fan, is how are you going to stop him? Because no matter who's in the paint, he's pretty much liable to rise up, dunk, or even get to the line. So
Right.
I'm very curious how that matchup is going to go. That one is probably going to be one of the really entertaining first round matchups. So I'm very curious to see how that one
Yeah,
goes.
I do wonder because when you think about it, like, you the only guy though, because like with Vanderbilt, normally you'd put him more on like, either a wing or maybe like a bigger.
Yes,
I don't feel like I've normally seen him guard really, well, I mean, Ja's not really tiny, but he's like what, 6'3", he's
six
relatively
three
thin.
ish.
He's
Yeah,
not a big guard.
no,
Uh, but then like Memphis doesn't really have a wing that scares you, right? Like
no.
Dylan Brooks, I don't think is, somebody that necessarily scares you.
They might force Memphis to shoot. That's probably what they're going to do.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I just wonder, like, how is Vanderbilt gonna fare in this series? Because I mean, I feel like the only guys you could really put him on is either Ja or Desmond Bain, right? Because I mean, I
True.
like, and that's kind of his value is primarily defensively. He doesn't really bring a whole lot on offense.
No.
So if it's a series where he doesn't really have anybody to guard, I mean, he's almost, I don't want to say a liability, but I feel like his minutes are probably going to shrink, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
also why it's nice to have say like a Rui Hachimura, right? Because
Yes.
Vanderbilt didn't do a whole lot tonight, but again, there wasn't really. I mean, other than Edwards, I mean, who was he going to guard like that? And I mean, I feel like the Edwards thing was more of a team thing because a lot of
Yes.
times, like when he had the ball, they would kind of show it like a double, sort of.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's like I don't really know what you do about that. But again, that's why it helps to have multiple forwards that you can put out there. I don't I don't know how many of these Laker guys that I can necessarily trust because again, I feel like you can trust LeBron and AD pretty much, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
I think so.
and yeah, exactly. And then after that, I guess Reeves, he wasn't great tonight, but I mean, I still feel like he's still a guy that's certainly more than capable of making big plays. Um, right? Dennis Schroeder, right? I think I mean, he's had some stinkers at times, but overall, I think he's a guy that's definitely going to play. So that's you kind of have to look at the 8-man rotation. I mean, they played 10 guys, but to me, it makes more sense to trim that down to probably 8. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I guess even though they played 10 guys, Wyndon only played like 2 minutes. So I mean, like that almost doesn't even really count.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of weird. I feel like that was just like filler time. I don't know. I don't know what the game plan was. Like you said, we were watching and we were kind of like, what the hell is going on?
I feel like they've probably I mean, against Memphis, I think you could probably get away with playing Wenyen Gabriel because
I
there's
think
not like
so.
yeah, because without Adams, there's not like a huge 7-footer,
Right.
you have to contend with. I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr., I guess, is 6'11", or so he's got a lot of length, but I don't know. I mean, he's not exactly the same as Towns. He's a
Right.
relatively different player, even though they can both shoot, right? Towns, I think, is the better 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
And also Towns is a lot bigger than Jaren Jackson Jr., even though Jaren Jackson Jr. is not small by any
Yeah. Um, kind of keeping it on the next or the first round. Do you think we should give our X factors, potential X factors for, each of the matchups coming up?
Yeah.
And I guess sticking to the plan because this is a play-in recap. I
Yeah.
guess we should only do the teams that are going to be coming out of the play-in.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I guess for the Lakers, who's your X factor? Just to keep it with the Lakers.
I would say Darvin Ham is definitely one. But
That's
if
a
we're
good one.
talking
Yeah.
about yeah,
No,
but
it could be a coach or a player. It could be anything.
but if we're talking about players, I mean, in general, I think it's gonna have to be you're gonna have to have at least two guys come off the bench and have good games, right?
Right.
Tonight, Rui and Schroeder got it done. So I feel like Rui's probably the X factor
Okay.
because if Vanderbilt's gonna have a game where he's not really gonna give you a whole lot, then you need to have Rui out there doing things, and he did
Exactly.
tonight. Um,
Because
so
Rui's not even that great of a defender. He's more of an offensive guy.
yeah,
And it's like if
he has
Vanderbilt's
improved.
not doing, anything on the offensive end,
Right.
but there's nobody for him to guard, then the perfect replacement, or substitution is Rui because he's going to put up some points,
He's
but he has
definitely
improved.
improved.
Yeah. From
Yeah,
his
he
days in
definitely has
Washington, he's
improved.
improved. Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely improved defensively as a Laker. Obviously, his role is different in LA than it was in
Yes.
Washington. But again, they have a pretty good development staff over there. So I mean, I think they've done a really good job of kind of telling him to do the other things, right? Because I think he was
The
kind of
little
looked at
stuff.
primarily as a scorer,
Yes.
right? But now in LA, he's doing other stuff, right? He's setting screens, sometimes acting as a roller, right? Competing
Right.
on the boards, also competing defensively. So I mean, I think he's definitely one of the X factors. Maybe not necessarily the biggest one, but he's a guy that I'm definitely looking at because again, I'm looking at if you have a game where Vanderbilt's not giving you a whole lot, then you got to have Rui step up. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
if both of them aren't playing well, then I think it's going to be really hard for them to win. Unless you're getting, I guess better contributions from the guards, right? Because most of the guards other than Dennis were pretty bad.
Yeah.
So I
I'll
guess if
give you
they
that.
have,
Yep.
yeah. So if the guards have a better game, right, then obviously, you're going to have a different scenario. But I'd say Rui is probably one of their biggest X factors, right? Because he's the only other four outside of LeBron. Because I look at Vanderbilt more as a three,
I think
uh,
so. A bigger
even though
three.
he's
Yeah.
like 6'8", 6. Even though he's I think a little taller than Rui. I feel like he's more like a three because I don't think you can really put him on like big guys and expect him to do great. I think
No.
he's better against guys that are either his height or smaller.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas Rui, I think, can battle stronger guys because he did a
Yeah.
good job against Towns in the regular season matchup, the last one they played. Even though he's nowhere near as tall, but he's just a big, strong guy.
Yeah.
So
For me, I think I'd have to agree with you. For me, it would either be Rui or Reeves. And Rui is just so versatile. I love this game in Washington. Sad to see him go. Happy he's on the Lakers and in the playoffs, or yeah, in the playoffs. But with Rui, his offense is very underrated. I think it's at one point I think he was averaging like 12 off the bench or something like that, which is pretty good for Washington. So the scoring is there, and I think that's something that the Lakers have struggled with a lot. The three isn't there, but he's gonna get you quick, easy buckets, and I think that's something that's gonna be valued, especially in the playoffs. Come down to late stretches where somebody might be in foul trouble, or if you need if you're in a game-winning situation, you need to go in all offense. I think that's a great guy to have out there. He doesn't draw as much attention as the flashier players, so. I think he's pretty much all reliable from SpongeBob, but
yeah,
like, yeah, he's like I don't know. It's weird because he's like a Swiss Army knife because he can shoot the three. It's just not at a super efficient clip, but it's there.
he was 2 of 5 tonight, so I think
Exactly.
because that's 40%. He'll
Yeah.
take.
So like his clip isn't, horrid. I'm not saying it's horrid,
No,
but it's not as, as high as you would like, but it is there. But yeah, I
it's
think
good enough.
Yeah, I think he's a great X Factor pick. I think Reeves is also one that could be an X Factor.
Yeah.
He had some big moments leading up to you guys even securing this seeding in the first place, and getting into the play-in. So, he's liable to have some big moments too. And, he could come down and like it could come down to one shot and he might be the guy that has to take it, if somebody's in foul trouble, et cetera, or whatever. But I think you can be confident with your X factors because I think it's a solid list and I like it a lot.
Rui.
Yeah.
And
I think Ham is the most concerning one because, if he doesn't produce, come up with a solid game plan for, anybody they play,
yeah.
they could be in, deep trouble.
Because there are games where he does a good job, and then there's
For
other
sure.
games where
Yeah.
it just feels kind of weird. But again, with a rookie head coach, unfortunately, that's kind of something you have to expect.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the pattern.
yeah. And then for Memphis, I would probably say, I think obviously Dylan Brooks is your biggest X factor,
Yes.
right? Because he's a starter. He's going to play a lot. He's going to spend a decent amount of time guarding probably LeBron.
He's gonna
I would
mouth off. He's gonna chirp.
exactly. So, I mean, the X factor for him is, I mean, what version of him are you getting, right? Are you getting a version where he's gonna, be more efficient, or are you gonna get a version where he's taking a lot of bad shots
And changes
right?
his jump shot every time.
Yeah, taking Memphis out of their offense. I mean, again, I think at this point he is what he is. So I think it's
They've
honestly just
accepted it.
right. He's a streaky shooter. So ultimately, it comes down to how many bad games, how many like awful games does he have, right?
Right.
Because I mean, it happened last year against Golden State, right? There was a game, I think, where they were up for a good chunk of the game, right? And then he basically shot him out of the game. He was awful, right? And they could have won that game, and it could have been a 7-game series, even without Ja,
Yes.
right?
All good
So
points. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But then he'll have other games where he actually does play well. I mean, I think you do need somebody with an edge, but at the same time, like it needs to still be like somewhat controlled. And I just think like at times, like the difference with him and Draymond is like Draymond's not going to normally take you out of your offense, right? Like most of his energy is channeled primarily into the defensive end,
Right.
right? Whereas like with Brooks, like yeah, he'll channel it in defensively, but like also he'll end up like just doing some really questionable stuff offensively. So
For sure.
I think that's a huge. And then the other X factor I'd say Luke Kennard, right?
Okay.
Because they got him as a shooter, right? Because Memphis is not that great of a 3-point shooting team. So if he has a big game off the bench where he just hits every three, and he tends to play pretty well against the Lakers, right? So if he has a huge night where he just can't miss, that's going to be a problem, right? Because then it makes it harder, to contain, say like Jaws drives or Jaren Jackson Jr. around the basket.
Yeah.
So I'd say that Dylan Brooks and Luke Kennard are probably the biggest X factors for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's solid. For Memphis, I would probably have to choose Jaren Jackson Jr. and Dylan Brooks. With Jackson Jr., we like his game a lot. All of the potential is there. It's all there. But at the same time, if he gets into foul trouble, Memphis is pretty much done for, because there's not a lot of big man depth on that team.
Not without adding Brandon Clark.
Exactly.
Those guys out. If he's in foul trouble, it's going to be really difficult.
It's going to be over. And I'm not sure what Memphis can game plan. What's going to be their plan if he gets into foul trouble? Because then LeBron and AD are just going to have a field day. Probably put up historic numbers.
Yeah. Once he's because that's even against other teams, right? As soon as Jaren Jackson Jr. is off the floor, it's a lot, it changes a lot of what Memphis can really do on both ends of the floor, right? Because that's the other thing is he's improved as an offensive player as well, right? He's a lot more comfortable around the basket. Right, his 3-point shot hasn't been as consistent, but again, he's still more efficient because he's figured out ways other than his jumper to get it going on offense. So if he's in foul trouble, yeah, I think like he said, that's gonna make it really hard for Memphis to
exactly
really do a whole lot. Because again, I know we talk about his defense, but again, I think offensively he's a big part of what they do. So I mean, it even changes stuff like say like screens, right? Say like he sets screens for Ja Morant, but if he's not out there, right, then it's a completely different guy, completely different type of player that you have to match up against. So, I think that's another great X factor in general, right? It's just can he stay away from fouling? And again, the Lakers are a team that gets to the line a lot. So, I mean, he's going to have his hands full having to try to contain, LeBron and AD from getting to the rim. But
100%.
yeah, but if he's out there, right, and he stays out of foul trouble and he forces them away from the basket and kind of
Oh, they
forces
could seal that series up quick.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that's the key there is just can you trust him to stay out of foul trouble? And I mean, I guess I might as well ask, do you think he can stay out of foul trouble or do you think it's probably not going to happen?
I think that's what they've probably been conditioning him for this, series. And they didn't know who they were going to play, but regardless, I think they've been probably talking to him about it, working on it, with him and trying to, just tell him to relax. Not every play, you have to be in the mix. There's some plays where you can, lay back, and I understand, he's basically the only guy down there, so it's a little harder, but I think he'll be able to do it. If I'm being honest, if I really want to predict this, I think he'll be able to do it. But here's the problem: the Lakers get so many free throws, so it's kind of written in the script that he's not going to. But I'm going to go against it and say that, yeah, I think he's going to stay out of foul trouble.
You think he will?
Yeah, I think he will. Do you think he will
I
or not? You're not too high on it.
I mean, at a certain point, I think he's gotten much better at it.
Yes.
I think it's going to be really tough because I mean, he's really the main guy, right? Without Adams, without Brandon Clark, they don't really have a whole lot of other big guys that they can put out there.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's going to be all on him, and I think that's going to be a really tough ask for him. And,
yeah, it will be.
Even if it's not, yeah, and even if it's not right, even if it's not, say, like a defensive foul, you could have like a couple fouls, in terms of offensive fouls.
Very
right?
true. Setting screens, yeah. Especially for Ja.
Using the elbow or whatever, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
you're going to get probably at least one of those. Most bigs usually are going to get at least one. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really trust the foul thing, but
I get you.
obviously, yeah. But if he can stay out of it, that's huge. I think it's much more likely that Memphis wins if he can stay out of foul.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess moving on into the East, who's your X factor for Atlanta? Sorry.
I mean, I guess for Atlanta, I mean, obviously Trae Young's got to be better than he played against Miami last year. I think
Yes.
he probably will, but again, Boston has a lot of guys they can throw at him. So I would say the X factor is probably going to be a combination of like a Okongwu,
Okay.
just the guys off the bench because I think that Sadiq Bey, a Okongwu, those guys, because I feel like Trae Young and DeJounte Murray are probably going to play relatively well.
Right.
It's just with Murray, you got to wonder whether does the 3-point shot fall? He hits
And he
some
takes a
tonight.
lot of them.
Yeah, and he's not a great 3-point shooter. If he can get to his spots, right, like in the mid range, right, he's fine, right. He did that tonight, but again, Miami's not the same team as Boston.
Nope.
So, I mean, I'd say it's probably the bench because
Okay.
I think with Boston, I think they have a lot of guys that they can just bring in, right? Because you have your starting five.
Then
and
you got
after
a
the
whole
starting
second
five-
unit. It's crazy.
Yeah, you got Brogdon, you got Derek White, right? I mean, and after that, I mean, it may be a little bit tough, but like, you could throw Grant Williams in there as your third big, right? Maybe you might see minutes from I don't know if Sam Hauser plays a whole lot. I mean, he is a shooter, but
A little bit
I think,
here and
yeah,
there.
I mean, I think a couple of those guys will probably be squeezed out of the rotation. But in general, Boston's depth is better, right? Like Brogdon
Yes.
is better than anybody coming off of Atlanta's bench, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he'd probably be like the third, well, maybe not third. He'd be like one of the 4 best players, I think, for Atlanta.
Okay.
But just in general, I mean, like, I think that's the X factor for me, right? So I'd
Okay.
say the bench guys for Atlanta, and I think honestly probably bench guys for Boston as well. Because
Very true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so I'd say the benches, right? Like
Probably gonna be a
again,
second unit game. I like
yeah.
that.
If you get really good games out of Sadiq Bey, out of Okongwu, right,
Yes.
and they kind of mix things up, right? Maybe you get a really good AJ Griffin game. They can make it interesting, right? But if it's primarily just on the starters, I think that's going to be a tough ask against Boston because Boston's really good.
Yeah, for me, I would probably say, Atlanta wise, I would probably go with either like Bogey. I think I would probably go with Bogey. And mainly because if he's on fire, I think they have a really good shot at, potentially, lighting up the court and going on a little bit of a run. It's not super likely, but I think, if he does, that could be a, game deciding factors, sway the momentum of some sort. I feel like that might be a little bit hot, but I think it is possible. But I completely agree with you. Benches, I think, are going to play a huge factor in this game, and also coaching too. I'm curious to see Quinn Snyder. I'm curious to see if he's gonna maybe pick at Mazzulla a little bit. Rookie head coach, first year. So very curious to see what's going on with that and see if they're going to play a little chess, or if Mazzulla might get outplayed, or something weird might happen. But I would probably go with Quinn Snyder and Bogey for me. And then Boston, I'd probably go with the same as you. Bench and probably Jaylen Brown, because I feel like if Tatum falls, I think Jaylen Brown has to be there to pick up the slack. And that's with any series, to be honest. I think any series they play, Jaylen Brown has to be there to pick up Tatum's slack if that happens, or just play really well alongside Tatum. Either way, yeah. Jaylen Brown has to show up, and I think he will, and that's why he's the X factor for me.
Yeah, I mean, Bogey's a good one. I mean, against Miami, it felt like he was shooting over a lot of because again, Miami's guards are relatively small, right? Lowry's small, even though he's kind of a stocky guy, right? He's only 6 feet. Vincent's pretty small, right? Hero's 6'5", right? But he's got short arms, right? So I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, I guess he's decent size, I guess,
yes.
for a 2 guard, right?
Yeah.
But with the shorter wingspan, I think he has a negative wingspan, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, his arms are kind of short.
Yeah. But regardless, that's not going to happen as much against Boston, right? Boston's got bigger, more physical guards than Miami does. I mean, obviously, I think he's a good player, right? And he definitely is an X factor. Because again, like off the bench, right? If those guys start hitting, if he can start hitting shots, it opens up the floor for Atlanta a lot.
Very true.
I pretty much agree with you on that
yeah.
one. I think the X factors is pretty much going to come down to the benches because, I mean, again, Atlanta has a number of guys they can put out there, but so can Boston, and Boston's top roster, right? Top of the roster is a lot better than Atlanta's, right?
For
Tatum
sure.
and Brown are significantly better than anybody in Atlanta.
Oh,
and that
yeah.
includes Trae Young.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
No disrespect to Trae Young, but I'm just saying, like, they're
none at all.
Yeah.
There's tiers, there's levels to it, and you have to acknowledge that. And I think the players themselves know that as well. If there's nothing really else to talk about, I feel like we hit all the bases. Covered all of them. Did you have anything to add?
No, I mean, it was, again, the play-in. I mean, I think we saw, at least with the second game, why the play-in was, a really terrific addition, to the NBA, in terms of making things more interesting, right? Because, I mean, again, like, just the fact that we had a really high-stakes game that meant a ton for both teams, I mean, it made it a really incredible watch.
Yes, it did.
I wish the basketball overall was better.
Right.
But I still think it was still an entertaining night.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you 100%. The play-in is supposed to be exciting. The first game was not exciting, if I'm going to be honest. That was a hard watch, but the second game, it was more entertaining for sure. And I think that's all I can really say about it. It was entertaining, but it needs to be a little bit more clean. I would like to see some clean basketball that we didn't really get to see today. Hopefully the games tomorrow are a little bit cleaner, refined, but I doubt it. There's a lot of nerves, anxiety, and these are big moments because these do determine the lower seeds for these playoffs. Yeah. But, I guess that wraps everything up. We appreciate everybody, tuning into this stream, all the viewers, chatters, everybody who participated, everyone who showed support coming from the YouTube Shorts community. We value everyone here who supports us at Off Ball Takes. We want to continue to grow with you guys. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the OBT Podcast. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. You guys are pretty good with that. We're growing bigger and bigger every day. And we get a lot of likes on our videos now. So thank you guys from the bottom of our hearts. We appreciate all the support. But yeah, we're going to head out. It's pretty late for us. It's, 2:00. We're on the East Coast. So
East Coast.
Yeah. So, that's dedication, man. Just give it to us. We stayed up, talk to you guys, but, we appreciate all the support once again, but, thank you guys for tuning in.
Mhm.